Okay, welcome back to another video. Welcome to my channel. My name is Attorney Carmiece Grace. Okay, I practice family law and estate planning in Maryland. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Now, this video is properly titled The Business of Marriage. Over the course of my practice, been more than 14 years now, particularly in family law, there are business aspects to a marriage. Everyone's talking about marriage is a business. Marriage is a business. They should say, no, it's not. It's about love. Well, when it comes to divorce, you will see the part about marriage that is business related. And there's no wonder about that. It deals with property rights. It deals with financial assets, right? It's not about the love anymore. Sometimes you ask, what's love got to do with it? And it's been many, many years later after the fact, and love is faded, and now it's all about the moolah, the money. So this video is about those people who do the fatal mistake, the fatal flaw, and I'm going to talk about it today, that you must avoid. Okay, now I understand sometimes there's a little trepidation about dealing with attorneys. We can be costly, maybe sometimes you don't trust us, all of that. I'm going to tell you in the instance that you really must rely on counsel. Let's work this down. Okay, so what are we talking about? Marital prenuptial agreements, antenuptial and prenuptial agreements. I'm going to tell you, I see this, I've seen this a couple of times throughout the course of my legal career, and it makes me cringe. It is a problem. And this is when people, maybe they'll, I don't know, go to a software. I don't know what you guys are doing out there. I don't know if you're finding websites that crank out marital settlement agreements and you fill in the blanks with your information and you don't even get it reviewed by an attorney. And then you sign it. And this agreement is supposed to hold water when there's a litigation. Listen, you really must have a little bit of respect for the practice of law, okay? The internet existed when I went to law school. Google was there. I am not that old, okay? So the fact that you're relying on these resources to draft agreements is problematic. And you might be saying, oh, you're just saying that because you want to get paid and you want us to spend a lot of money. And with the computer, it can do it just as you can do it. And it's going to put you guys out of business. Well, all of that is not true. Let me tell you a story as to how people make huge mistakes when it comes to these agreements. It happens in marital settlement agreements. It happens in prenuptial agreements. It happens in antenuptial agreements. First, let's go through step one. These are contracts. In law school, any attorney will tell you contracts is a really complex area of the law because it deals with language. You've seen all the videos where there's a million different words to describe one object. There's so many interpretations of one word. So the language itself is tricky, fluid, and varied. That's what makes contracts difficult. Do each party understand the intent, and that whether that intent is conveyed in the proper words? You are dealing with slippery slopes right here. So here's an example. And I'm going to tell you about two examples where there were things on the line and people tried to do it themselves and it didn't work out. And I'm going to tell you right now, even before I get into the story, you need an attorney to review your agreements if there's something in those agreements that are valuable. If it's worth $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, it is worth spending, I don't know, even a couple $100 to have an attorney review it to make sure it's going to hold a cup of water in court. You've never litigated a contract. You've never represented yourself in a hearing. You have no idea what's to come down the line. So I beg of you, please do not draft your own prenuptial agreements. I beg of you, please do not draft your own marital separation agreements. And if you do, at least have them reviewed by an attorney. Okay? Make that promise to me. If it's worth something on that paper. So what happens is, let me give you two examples. And I am in a case right now where The parties were on their second marriage and they decided to enter into a prenuptial agreement, trying to be conservative, right? Thinking about, well, being realistic about it. We're advanced in age. We had come to the business, well, we come to this marriage with assets and we don't want any problems. So what do? Husband comes up with an agreement, wife reviews it, she does her best. In the agreement, in a prenuptial agreement, what you have to do, you have to decide and define what the separate assets are of the parties. So your job in the agreement is to define what is the separate property. Your job is also to define what is the marital property. Now, that sounds simple, and sometimes it can be. But in this instance, the key asset that one person was concerned about was a business. So that business was clearly defined. This is my stuff. They did, intend to, buy real property together. That property was clearly defined that if it's jointly titled, it's our marital assets. Now, what was left out? What was left out was in that separate property and in the agreement, it does not read clearly and that's why you have to watch these computer generated agreements that are not drafted by attorneys. See, in my agreements say that any property that is separately titled to the individual is their separate asset. That's standard in agreements written by attorneys. I don't know what software wrote this, but in this software, it made them define every asset that is supposed to be separate property. That list was deficient. It left off key things, right? It left off important assets. So now there's Swiss cheese in this agreement that may leave exposure for litigation. And what happens is if your marital settlement agreement or your prenuptial agreement is deficient in any way, you can be caught up in litigation about those assets that were not addressed. So again, let's go through what happened in this agreement, just in case I went over it too quickly. Typically in agreements, it says any asset that is individually titled to the separate parties is their property. This agreement wasn't drafted like that. It said, I need you to write down everything on this schedule that you deem to be separate property. And it was deficient. And now we have to deal with that. And had that agreement been reviewed by an attorney, that would have been a highlighted deficiency, and either the schedule would have been supplemented, amended before it was signed. And now, there's a gaping hole. Once the agreement is signed and now the divorce is pending, I can't do anything to fix it. So please enable your attorneys, whether it's me or somebody else, to look at these agreements and rubber stamp them as good, okay? I tend to not even really like to put my name on other people's agreements, because when we draft agreements, we know what every word in that agreement says. I know what it's intended to say. I know where the waivers are. I know my agreements. So I'm going to tell you, if there are valuable assets, and I mean hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake, do not attempt to do this yourself. No. Let me give you another example of when this happened. These people wanted to circumvent the long litigation process and come up with a settlement agreement. And this was the trade-off. The trade-off was that husband was going to pay off a second mortgage for $50,000, right? No, wife was going to pay off the second mortgage for $50,000, and husband was going to pay the college expenses of the daughter. And they figured it would be about the same amount. Well, the second mortgage, and they wrote this on the kitchen table. They sat down amicably at the kitchen table and they wrote it down and they drafted the agreement themselves. Okay, so now what's going on? Wife comes to me and says he's not fulfilling the agreement. And I'm like, well, let me take a look. She says, well, I fulfilled my bargain. I paid off the second mortgage. She went first. She paid the $50,000 off. Now the daughter is in school and husband is not paying. And she wants to sue him because he's not paying. And I look at this agreement and I gasp, because what has happened in this agreement is that the only words that were used to define the college expenses were tuition. She says in the agreement, I want you to pay her tuition. If you've gone to school, you'll know that college expenses is way more. Tuition even isn't even that bad. Have you ever looked at your bill from college? It's not that bad. Tuition, you'd be like, that's all I'm paying for tuition? Maybe about $8,000 or so. The rest is room and board and food and housing and transportation and books. Books. So none of those things were included in the agreement. So when we got before the judge was like, well, I think he might have paid about, 20,000. And he was like, well, how much was the tuition only? And because he had paid enough to cover the tuition only, all of those other expenses of her daughter. And here's the thing, he also manipulated her into coming up with a loan. Like, I don't know how that happened. And you hate these stories where now they come, oh, he always wins. He always wins. He gets away with everything. Get counsel. If you feel like you're dealing with someone that's manipulative, you're dealing with someone that doesn't play fair, you're dealing with someone that you feel maybe has some advantage, throughout the years and has been a little slippery, a little slimy, that's what counsel is for. Get an attorney. If it's $50,000 on the line and you mean to tell me you don't think that's worth paying, I don't know what an attorney would charge to review the agreement, even if it's $1,000, you know what I mean? And I think that's a message that I have for us now that, when you come into assets that have value, you have to think about safeguarding those assets and the cost that comes with maintaining that asset. And sometimes that is dealing with lawyers. Why do you think everybody that has money and businesses, they have accountants, they have lawyers, they are protecting their assets? This is something that we need to embrace now that we are coming into a lot of money, not that we haven't had it, but if you're coming into some money for the first time and now you're dealing with estate planning or you're dealing with contracts, don't do it yourself. Just get an attorney to review it. So that's all I have to say today about the business of marriage and why I need for you guys to take it seriously, because when it comes down, lawyers, we never want to have to litigate your crappy agreements sometimes. It's like I did draft it and then I have to take the L. No, I don't want to. I don't want to go in there with you with that agreement that has Swiss cheese in it. And then I'm a loser and we're losing. So let's win on the front end. Let's be proactive. Let's get these agreements reviewed. Take the time that it needs. Take the precaution that it deserves and give yourself a fighting chance. So we are going to continue this series on the business of marriage. We're going to deep dive into the other aspects. So this is what you need to do to protect your assets. But let's talk about when there are no agreements and there's alimony on the line, there's marital property on the line, and we're going to peel that back. So maybe you can consider why you may want to get a prenuptial or antenuptial agreement so that you can just focus on the love of your relationship. You can just focus on voluntarily being there, enjoying your companion, enjoying what there is to enjoy, and not really being too stressed out about the business of marriage. And let's get to the love aspects of marriage. So this is your attorney, Carmiece T. Graves. If you need any advice, you have any questions, submit your questions to info@ctgraveslaw.com. I will address them on my next segment. If you need a consultation, you can use the link below and click it and book one, and we can talk. All right. So I hope you guys found this informative and helpful. Of course, subscribe, like, share, advise others to get an attorney and to not do it themselves. Talk to you later. Okay, bye.